Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
Well, this is a tad unusual in that it's just me tonight, since Jason is off currently on a trip related to research. So I am the one that will be doing a small intro and small outro. I have been a bit behind in keeping up on Twitter and on the Star Trek shows and Andor and all sorts of stuff just because I've been under the weather, but I'm starting to catch up now. And I talked to Jason about this, and my problem with the Star Wars shows is I know I've heard Andor is a really good show, but I'm getting a little worn out of playing around within the Skywalker saga timeline. I'm ready for something new, new as in outside of that timeline, whether it's before that, High Republic, or after that. I really love to see something after that, but we shall see. The one thing Jason and I have talked about a lot is, and we talked about this when Jim Johnson was on, was finally getting some time to do some gaming, and specifically, wow, Jason's not here, so I can't speak. Star Trek gaming. And what you're going to hear tonight, since we did record this before Jason went on his trip, is some really fascinating discussions about starships. And obviously the person to have that conversation with is Aaron. And it's been a true pleasure to be able to speak with him tonight, or actually earlier in the week. And I can tell you, and I'll talk more about this after the intro. At the end of the discussion, it really made me introspective, or I was introspective around the idea around starships as a sentient being and treating them as part of the crew. So I hope you enjoy this evening, and I found it extraordinarily fascinating. Again, truly a pleasure to have Aaron on with us, and we'll look forward to talking with you after.
Aaron Pollyea has a background in astronomy and physics, but currently has a day job dealing with climate change and its intersection with agriculture. He has been a lifelong Star Trek fan and has been working as a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures since it began. In his free time, Aaron may be found gazing through his telescope, reading a good book, or doing historical reenacting with his wife.
You won't get the first attempt at our intro that I completely blew. So let me try this again. So Aaron Pollyea has joined us tonight. Aaron, thanks for taking the time.
Hi, glad to be here.
Perfect. And I know there's a lot to talk about.
Oh, man.
There's things I think from what I've read and heard that you probably could talk about related to starships and things. But,
oh, yeah.
So I suspect we'll probably get there.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, probably. Jason gave me the death look if we weren't going to get there. But what I'm really interested, we were talking a little bit before we hit record, and then before we hit record again. And you were talking about the fact that you do research, and I'm not going to give it away, but when I heard you say research and data analysis, I'm paraphrasing, you got me at data analysis because I'm a data junkie. Mm-hmm. And so is Jason. So if you don't mind, this is organic. We'll go where it goes. But talk a little bit, what do you actually do from a research perspective, even outside of the work that you're doing with starships?
Well, I do climate change research. So I work for the state climatology office and the state climatologist of the state of Michigan. And I end up doing a lot of data crunching, number crunching for climate and weather, and how it applies to agriculture. That's a lot of what I do is agriculture related. I also work with a group called EnviroWeather, which is it's Michigan State's its own kind of meso network of its own weather stations that we generally have set up on farms, and there's lots of like leaf wetness sensors, things like that. It's a regular weather station. You can go online and find all the information for it, but I think it's over 80 plus stations now across the state. But yeah, a lot of number crunching, a lot of being an assistant for classes for my boss, because he teaches undergrad and graduate classes, but my main position is to actually do data analysis for climate change.
Okay, so you're doing climate change science these days, but your background is in geology. Yes?
No, my background's actually in astrophysics.
Okay, so talk about that. Yeah.
Well, I from like an early age, I always wanted to be an astronomer, like day one. Astronomy. That's what it's all about. I was one of those strange kids at 6 years old that could name every star in the sky that's brighter than first magnitude.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could point to a constellation, tell you, you know, the primary stars in it, how far away those stars were, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So going into astronomy was easy. That was an easy choice.
Yeah.
And that's what I did with my undergrad, and then ran out of money. And I ended up changing my undergrad to earth science to just immediately graduate, because I just, money is a problem. But so I ended up with my bachelor's in science and earth science with a specialty in astrophysics, because I had taken all the way up through 400 level courses in astrophysics. And then I went into the Department of Geography to get a climate change degree.
Interesting.
For my master's of science.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, it is a little ironic. I can't be the only one who looks at your academic background and sees, okay, he starts in astronomy, and now he's essentially designing the stats for starships.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. How did you get from A to B on that one? I mean,
well, that's a really good question. And it's tough to answer, because Star Trek and my love of science basically start right away, almost at the same time. I do remember my earliest memory is sitting on my mom's lap in a drive-in theater, seeing Star Trek the motion picture on a drive-in screen.
Nice.
And it was cold. I remember it being cold, but I remember that wormhole scene like very clearly. It's one of my first memories. But beyond that, I have other very, very early memories is just sitting out on my grandmother's porch and looking at the night sky and just being so in love with everything. So it's really tough to kind of separate my love of Star Trek and science and astronomy. So though they've always been tied together in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
That's the best way to explain it.
But okay, so no, I mean that resonates exceptionally strongly with me, but I don't find myself writing for Star Trek Adventures. So
yeah.
How did that happen?
It was okay. It's a strange story. Back in the day, long before Star Trek Adventures was even a glimmer in Modiphius's eye, I loved playing RPGs. I was already doing some really basic freelance writing for BattleTech, the BattleTech product line, which is a war game. But I liked how fast it was compared to, let's say, some more chunky rules set war games. Let's put it that way. But I wanted to see if I could actually make a war game that was less chunky and less brutal than Starfleet battles for myself. And I could do a big fleet battle, let's say, and play with my friends. And I designed one. From the ground up and built starships using my own rules. I built a whole rule set to design starships, all that, and then built an entire framework for like discovering new worlds, new civilizations, and science in it. And then I heard about Modiphius coming up with Star Trek Adventures. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I can write this, because I look on my hard drive and I have 600, 700 pages worth of
Oh,
tiny type
my
stuff that
God.
I've written already, not just starships, but like,
Yeah.
here's the science, how I can break down like nebula that we see inside inside the show and movies. Here's what you can do to design new ships. And I had lore written down for all these starships and in little like digestible chunks, kind of like what you see in the books. So I sent in not only like some of the things that I had written for Battletech, but I had sent in, here's a chunk of my tactical game that I made, and with the writing that I had done for it. And while I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages already written, I only sent in like 10 or something like that. Hey, look, here's the primary rule set is only 10 pages. This is the idea of how I write, what I write, and I have tons of ideas. And they said, can you write like starship talents? Yeah, no problem. So all the starship talents basically came out of my tactical game. Can you write the starships? Yeah, no problem. I already have them all written, all the canon ones that we're going to include. I have them all written. And then they're like, well, can you also write the stats and have it work in 2D20? And I said, sure, I can do that. And can you write the science? Are you good with science? Yeah, of course I am. I know I can speak regular science and then technobabble like, it's going out of style. So no problem. And so I fell into it. Really, they really liked what I had sent in, I guess. And I'm humbled to actually have them have Modiphius like it. And then Jim took the reins of the line and saw that I had been writing a ton of this stuff and had a large background in Trek lore and etc. It goes on, right? Like there's reasons, I guess, why I'm there. I'm not trying to toot my own horns because I know I make mistakes just like everyone does. But I'm pretty in love with the Trek lore and the Trek universe, and I tend to like keeping it in my head like most people might keep football scorers or football players and their stats in their heads.
Oh man, that's so cool. God, is that impressive?
Do you still, just out of curiosity, just because I'm fascinated by it, do you still ever pull out and do any gaming with your original? Now that obviously STA is out, you have a robust, obviously you know this better than we do, robust line of material for it. But do you ever pull out the 10-pager and play? Or
yeah, because it's a different style of game. See, Star Trek Adventures is an RPG, where my tactical game wasn't. It's not an RPG. It's about starships going pew pew. And STA, while you can have starships go pew pew, it's not really designed to be a quick, fast, tactical battle game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, if I want to pull out the game with a few friends, yeah, absolutely.
It's as a side note. So with our good friend Brian in high school, I would play Mech Warrior with him.
Okay.
And he always GM'd. And I mean, I never lasted more than like 20 minutes. I mean, it was just basically watch Jason be destroyed, but it was always so much fun. But it was a totally different thing to play than anything else I've played.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I played Starfire, which is a pretty unknown tactical type of hex starship game. That was probably one of the first that I did. So that's why I'm fascinated by the tactical aspect. And I know there are video games out there that have tried to non-online games, just non MMO, MMO games.
Yeah, there's a Starfleet Battles tactical game that was on the computer that I really enjoyed. And I actually did enjoy Starfleet Battles as a game. It's just that it took too long and it was really complex. But no shade at Starfleet Battles at all.
I just thought, Jason hasn't, but I did a lot of Star Trek Online. So, and I know that's not completely Starship Battle oriented, but I still enjoy it.
I've
played it. I just don't generally have the time for online games anymore.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious though, on that note. So one of the reasons we so appreciate talking to you this evening is the timing is just so unintentionally uncanny that Utopia, Planitia, is out, at least. Well, I was going to say in PDF form, though. I saw on Twitter the other day someone posted that they'd received theirs, right? And you probably saw Jim's comment on Twitter. It was, I think that's the first one I've seen in the wild, right? And this was like he had tipped us off that something big is coming and blah blah blah, and so I'd been drooling, and since something actually, till there was actually information. And then this is one of those rare things where, I mean, I pre-ordered like immediately as soon as it was available. Beat Brad. Just I was so eager for this. But then we've got Fleet Week. And then of course New York Comic-Con just ended, at least the Star Trek stuff. And with the drop of the Picard season 3 trailer, and I'm just going to try not to talk about that or we'll be here for 3 hours. But with that, and of course the ship porn in that of the new Titan A and then the Enterprise F. And and Brad, I'll tell you, right, one of the first, when I text you to say it dropped, I just gotten home and seen it, I text you to say the trailer's out there, the next trailer, and then what did I say? I'm like, the F is in there, right? Which I'd never even, because I don't play STO, I'd never even heard of until I saw it in your book, and I'm like, oh, what do they know?
Well, I will be perfectly fair about this, that the STO ships I did not write. Those are Thomas from, he's the artist from Star Trek Online. I just kind of checked it to make sure that the ships tended to fit within the rules set, or added some ideas about phrasing in the write-ups. But yeah, I'm glad to see STO stuff on screen. I'm glad that they're in our book. I'm glad that we kind of had a sneak peek in Utopia Planitia for what's going to be in Picard season 3. Absolutely. It is really cool.
So this might be an unfair question for you, but if you consider all of canon, even soft canon.
Oh yeah, I know where you're going.
You know where I'm going with this. And
so
I mean, for someone like you who lives and breathes this stuff, maybe this is unfair to ask you to limit it, but do you have a ship or a class that you really adore more than the others?
Every time I see it on screen, and it's never really on screen except either on like diagrams or like a model. I love seeing a Daedalus class starship on screen.
Not what I expected.
Because it's so unlike other Federation, Starfleet vessels up until like the last episode of TNG, where you see the future, Olympic class that has that big ball. And I love that idea that a Starfleet vessel, an Earth Starfleet for USPA, United Earth Space Probe Agency, had this like big ball at the front, and it kind of had this doofy looking canister body with spindly nacelles. And that these were kind of these were the mass-produced destroyers of the Earth Romulan War, that these were the things that were like ubiquitous in the 2150s and 60s. And I just love seeing them, just because you don't really see them in action on screen. So every time I see like a piece of art that has a Daedalus being a true, hero kind of ship firing missiles or whatever out of its back, I love it. And there's a great picture in Utopia Planitia that has a squadron of Daedaluses firing nuclear missiles out of its secondary hull, at Romulan warbirds during the Earth Romulan War. And I'm like, okay, I like that. But I mean, I love all the starships for different reasons. I'll have a smile on my face seeing Miranda's tooling around during the Dominion War. Every time I see a Galaxy class, it's like, okay, there it is.
Yes.
Or I get that little flutter in my heart when I see an old Constitution. Every starship has its things for me.
I'm curious what you think through your lens of ships as characters, right? And more than but as well as the stats. What do you think of what Trek has done with the Enterprise in Strange New Worlds?
That's a good question. I don't mind that they changed the looks of it. I mean, if they made it completely different, like let's say suddenly it looks like an Excelsior or something like that, and they go, no, this is I wouldn't be okay with that, but that's not what they did.
No.
They made like subtle changes. Yeah. You know what? That's fine, because in the end, you can kind of look at TOS as a period piece in some ways. And you can say, well, today they're just making it for a different audience. They're not making it for, tiny little TV screens. They're not making it for TVs that are black and white and low resolution. They're making it so it pops on the screen and catches the eye. And, it looks different. Of course it does. I love my original TOS. Don't get me wrong at all. I want to see those chunky duotronic controls on the bridge. But you know what? If it's not that way, it's not that way. I'm not going to lose any sleep about it. Good for them. I can easily rationalize it when I'm writing up Starship, information. I can tell you exactly why those things would be different depending on the year, why they might look more advanced than what you see in TOS. And I have.
Brad, go ahead.
Have you? Oh, I was just going to say. So, I'm always the guy that does the right turns when we have conversations. Obviously, you did writing before Star Trek, the Star Trek stuff you're doing with STA and so on. You did BattleTech stuff. You obviously have your tactical game. Are you? You had mentioned before, and Jason and I can relate. Time is limited, but do you still do gaming? Do you still take time, or do you have time to do any STA gaming or other gaming?
I do an online game for STA, and it wasn't from day one either. I don't think I started until about 2020 playing STA. I had never actually played a game of STA for the first couple of years that it was out. Even though I was writing, I should say that I have written for every STA book except the Operations Division book. But I checked things that were in it. So I've been writing STA since day one. And it's weird that I hadn't actually gotten to play it. But I'm glad that I do now. I have a lot of fun playing in the online game that I was in, that I am in, I should say. And I didn't want to have a character that actually dealt with engineering or the sciences, like the hard sciences, because that's where I'm really comfortable. So I ended up starting by making a Tellarite ship's counselor. And it was a ton of fun, and I'm still playing him today, but because he's so incredibly, I guess he's just really competent at being a scientist, he has moved into the science officer's position, which is a strange move from being ship's counselor to that. But he's also been in Starfleet since the 2340s. So when Picard was a cadet, he was also a cadet. He's been around forever, and we're playing in the 2380s. So he's been in Starfleet for 40 plus years. So he has a wide breadth of experience, I guess. So it's fun. It's fun playing that character that still has all the focuses of psychology, psychotherapy, and being the chief science officer on this ship.
As well as psychology should be, but I'm biased. Yeah, keep going.
Oh. I was just going to ask, can you, if not to give too much away, I'm just out of curiosity, what's the ship name and what class?
USS Pioneer, NCC 74700. It's an Intrepid class.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I like that little minutia type of
I'll
stuff.
even do that.
Oh, yes. So Aaron is wearing the hat with the ship on it. I mean, that's pretty slick.
Yeah, I ended up getting these hats made and sending them to everybody on the crew.
That's commitment.
That is cool. Jason, I think we need to get hats.
We need to start playing and then we can get hats.
Yeah, I know. We haven't done a good job of keeping up with playing. Do you get a chance ever to do any other gaming, or is it really just kind of focused on that and then everything else that's going on in real life?
Now and then I get to do BattleTech. Now and then, maybe once every few months. And otherwise, my gaming, quote unquote, large air quotes, is doing historical reenactments.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
So now,
that's my hobby.
Is it? Oh,
okay.
A hobby. Now I got to ask. I know we're right turn. If you don't mind, break that down, just because I will play on occasion 4D computer gaming when it comes to reenactment. It's not true reenactment, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Like Hearts of Iron.
Yeah. I've done Hearts of Iron. I just fired up Hearts of Iron 4 probably about a month and a half ago and did some. What do you do with that?
Well, my wife and I both do World War II Soviet.
Oh,
And we got into it because we kept going to like air shows and things like that, and hearing the announcers talk about the allies of World War II and never mentioning the Soviets. And I have a lot of knowledge of the Soviet Union and Russia and Ukraine and all that, and it started really ticking me off. Just the general lack of knowledge about the Eastern Front in the war. And finally, at one point, my wife and I just kind of looked at each other and said, we just have to start going to these things in uniform and teaching, and okay, let's join a unit and actually go to more of these more to like reenacting events rather than like air shows or cultural events or things like that, where we can have a large group of people around us to make sure that our equipment is correct, that we all kind of fall in together, we go out onto the battlefield and do weapons demonstrations, that kind of thing. It is about teaching history though, more than anything. It's interesting.
If you don't mind me asking, what kind of drew you into like Soviet, Russian, Ukrainian type of history?
My family, my great grandfather originally came from Ukraine. He was a Ukrainian Jew outside of Kyiv, and he fled from one of the pogroms that was occurring at the time. And like right before World War I came around, he immigrated to the United States, and I never met him. He died long before I was born, but my grandfather, who he was like the first son born in the United States, he learned all the kind of traditions and food, and my grandmother learned it all from them too. So I kind of grew up with the food and a lot of the cultural kind of things from it around me. And because that was like where the family originally came from, of course I'm going to learn about it and understand it as best as I can. And so over time, just picking it up. I've been to Russia twice and Ukraine once.
Wow.
And what my first trip to Russia was right after the fall of the Soviet Union. So that was a very strange and interesting trip.
Oh, like late 80s, early 90s type era.
92, the summer of 92.
A year
so,
after.
Yeah, it was the summer after. Everyone was still using Soviet rubles. There were still, everyone was still in Soviet uniforms. Very strange time, interesting time.
When you, I'm hammering on this because this is just fascinating, and I want to go back to starships, but you caught my attention with this.
That's okay.
Do you travel when you do this with your reenactments and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I live in central Michigan, and there aren't any reenactments in my hometown here where I live now. I shouldn't say my hometown, because where I grew up was right on Lake Michigan, right across from Chicago, and there is a reenactment there once a year. But my wife and I will travel up to 7 hours away by car to go to specific reenactments. Most of them are within about 3 or 4 hours though drive.
I'm on the other side of the lake from you in Milwaukee. So
okay, yeah, there's actually a reenactment that we do every year that's in Saukville, Port Washington.
That's what I was gonna. It was a loaded question. I knew you were in Michigan. That's why I was gonna ask, because that's about 45-50 minutes from me, from where I'm located.
Yeah, the Saukville event is actually a lot of fun. Yeah, we're there every year. We have been for at least 4 years. Yeah. Well, and we actually have members that are up in Minnesota as well, up in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, because so I mean, obviously I'm in St. Paul and Brad's in Milwaukee, but Brad's from Oconomowoc and I'm from Fond du Lac. So, but we never did any of that.
And see, the air show that I was talking about earlier was Oshkosh.
There it is.
Every summer, going with my father up until he died. It was every summer I spent in Oshkosh, Appleton, Neenah, Wisconsin, Fond du Lac.
Yes. Yeah.
And you never saw a ton of Soviet era aircraft there. They do bring some in on occasion. Depend on the year. But
mostly it's like the jet MiGs, like MiG 15s and 17s.
We actually
they've brought in Oh, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I'll follow
No,
up.
I was going to say recently they've been bringing in like a World War II yak, and while they have like U.S. reenactors that are on site for EA Oshkosh, we wanted to come in our uniforms to get a picture with the old World War II yak, because specifically my wife is actually her main uniform that she portrays. Well, who she portrays is a female pilot. A female Soviet pilot, because women served right alongside men on the front lines. And we wanted to get our picture, and they absolutely refused us to be able to come in with a Soviet uniform because some people felt they weren't allies. And that again, it's that whole
welcome to the Fox
Cold
Valley.
War.
Not to be blunt, but yeah. Wow.
Yeah, reenactment or not, I guess the war is over. No need to. Well, we'll leave it. It's unfortunate because it would be cool to see.
All
those.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that came up again, and I'm going to end the side bant on it. No, I'm fascinated because I'm an EAA fan. I went there all the time, like you did when I was younger. Have you made it over? Like I know you said you went until your father passed. Have you? And then obviously you had this situation with the uniforms and all. Do you tend on going back at some point?
I do plan on going back within the next couple of years. My brothers still go every year. Okay. It's just it's going back without my father is something a little tough to do. We went back the summer after he died. And it feels like it was just last summer. It wasn't. It was 3 or 4 years ago. And I try not to think about it, so that's why I don't have the date in my head. But we went back the summer after he died, and that was tough. Just because he wasn't there telling the same stories that he told every single year, and you just are kind of sitting at the air show waiting for him to talk, and he's not there, and it's and that's how it is. That's life, right?
Yeah.
There seems to be a recurring theme of aircraft, spacecraft.
Oh yeah.
Air flight, stars. I dig it. That's kind of, and Jason's the one who has the shipyard books, right, Jace? You have the
oh my god. I just Eagle Moss. I just picked up the Federation ones because I thought I either have to really limit this or I have to get another job. And so I was really careful, and I just got the Federation ones, but the Starfleet ones specifically. But those are just, as references, I think those are absolutely spectacular. But again, I think Utopia Planitia and what you and the others did takes no backseat to that, and especially the narrative. Like, what you all wrote, not just about the ships themselves, but and we've talked about this a bit on here with Jim, but the life in Starfleet, and just like what's it mean to be on a ship. The creativity is just so off the chart, and the insights into the ships, the lifestyle, the concepts inherent to Starfleet and the Federation that then is portrayed. I think you guys really hit everything so well on the head. Someone could pick up, this is a source book where someone could pick it up. You don't have to be interested in role playing. This is just worth having and reading and gawking at.
Did you think about, there's a lot of Trek fans who probably may pick this up that didn't necessarily have an idea about role playing, but Jason and I have talked about RPG as literature.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I have found it's a kind of a joke with Jason that he makes fun of me because I have all the books.
Sure.
And so I'll read the Command and the Science Division books, and I'll read those as literature, even though we don't have time to play these days. Is that kind of been in your mind as you have been working through that in terms of writing with the idea that maybe people are going to read this for the sake of reading it?
Yes. And I for sure, because I will say, if I'm not writing a rule, like if I'm writing something that is like command plus communications difficulty 3 or whatever, that's different story. But if I'm writing something that has nothing to do with a rule and I'm just trying to write a description, I'm not writing a description for a role-playing game. I'm writing a description that I would want to read in a piece of Star Trek material. Like, I want to learn something about the universe, about this ship, about the people that serve aboard it. That's what's most important. I want to draw people in and give these vessels life, so to speak. And it's the same thing when I'm writing about science or technology, because a lot of the science and technology that's in STA, that's like what I do. Mm-hmm. I really want to give people an insight into how this technology works, or why the science is the way it is. Because I like to hear people say, I like it when people say, you know, Star Trek doesn't have good science in it. And it's like, well, the best Star Trek does have good science, because it might not be real science, but it's supposed to hold strict rules. Right. Otherwise, it's magic. You know, and even though you can also say that magic should actually have strict rules, that's how you write a good magic system, that magic is more fantasy and Star Trek is supposed to be grounded in fact. So if you say something, here's how this is, it's going to be that way. And you need to either come up with a rationale for why it's that way, or you just need to come up with a rationale, I should say.
Yeah, I think even before Jason and I started doing the podcast and the books, I was purchasing them because I was using them as lit. Mm-hmm. I would sit and comb over them and read them, because I found it, you know. Yep. I was sitting on your lap when my parents took me to, or my mom took me to see motion picture, and mm-hmm. you know, I couldn't believe how freaked out my mom was when she came home and said Spock was dead after, you know, Wrath of Khan. So you know,
I have said in other interviews, I saw every Star Trek movie in the theater. Yeah. And the most emotional I ever got was when Enterprise blew up in Search for Spock.
Yep.
Oh, and I wept. I was a child. I don't remember how old I was, 6 or 7, but I wept. And the reason is because that's the ship that had all the adventures, that this went to all the places that we saw in TOS, that Kirk had all those things that he had brought back, those memories that were in his quarters, and Spock did. And Scotty loved that ship. He, you know, and you see its name and registry burning out on its hull, and then it burns up in the atmosphere. And I wept as a child, and it still kind of chokes me up watching it to this day. And that's the kind of feeling I like giving in these starships when I'm writing starships, is these are characters, these are people, these ships are people. You should feel it when they are hurt, when they take damage. You should worry when they're stumbling through space after encountering a spatial anomaly of some sort. Yes. Worry about them. They are characters.
No, I remember when I came home, when we got it under some clandestine methods, we got a VCR copy of it. Mm-hmm. And I actually broke the tape at that point, because I would rewind and play that burn up over and over again. Because like you, I grew up watching those and watching the movies. That was the ship, you know, and I still struggled with End of 3 and 4 when they were flying a Klingon ship, because it wasn't the Enterprise. You know, very odd. And even when they came out with the A at the end of 4, it wasn't the same. But I remember watching the hull collapse on and losing and you seeing the ship ID and Enterprise. Oh boy, yeah. Now you got me choking up thinking about it, because I was probably 4th, 5th grade, so 8, 9, 10.
I gotta watch this again. I don't know the last time I watched 3.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
know. It's an unsung good Trek movie. I mean, people kind of say it's one of the odd ones. No, there's a lot of really good things in it. A lot of really good things.
If you had to pick one, what would be your of the original 6?
The TOS, yeah.
The TOS 6.
Wow. It would be down to 2, and it's tough. It would be down to either the motion picture, because it is the most Star Trek of the Star Trek films. Yes, it's slow. I will fully admit that, but it's a really good Star Trek episode. Yes. Yeah, it takes from other TOS episodes. And then I love 4. I absolutely love 4 because it just shows it, and it's not the comedy in it. I love the crew being together and working towards this goal of saving the world by saving the whales. By doing this really good, that whales are people. And like on my hat, I have my little cetacean crew member pin, but I always try to put in some cetacean reference in a lot of the stuff that I write. So, in the Shackleton Expanse book, there's the cetacean explorer. And it's, hey, look, if these cetaceans, if these humpback whales are able to talk to the whale probe, they're people too. And I loved that, hey, this is not something that they questioned really. The crew of the HMS Bounty, I should say, they didn't question this. They just went back in time and said, we have to save these whales because they're people. They will talk to the whale probe. Not, these are just like creatures or whatever. No, these were people that we had to save. And Spock mind melds with one, with Gracie. Did you know Gracie's pregnant? She and he has a conversation with her. Yeah, they can't.
It is a good movie.
But yeah, I love it. I love it for that. I absolutely love it for that.
I still think the comedy of when Kirk sees Spock in the actual.
Yeah. But I mean, otherwise, you can say, 2 is just such a good dramatic piece. It really is. See, I can geek out about it. I can geek out about. I mean, I don't. 5 is 5 is 5, but I like all of them for different reasons. Really, even 5, I do. Surprisingly, but most people crap on that one. They really do. Like, it's mostly rushed is what the problem with Final Frontier, and there's still a lot of good stuff in there. So it's tough to pick a favorite out of them, but I can say if I want to put in a film, I'll put in the motion picture or Voyage Home.
Speaking of ships, so I don't know if you've watched. Speaking of ships,
yeah.
See, I told you I'm all over the place.
We should eventually get to ships. Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm gonna consider this a segue. So, do you watch Discovery?
Yes.
With the latest, what are your thoughts on the now
32nd century
ships?
Yeah.
Like the Mitchell, and I know they named that after Kenneth Mitchell, the actor.
I don't think we know enough about the 32nd century ships to really make a good conclusion. I mean, some of them look fine. Some of them I'm like, you know what? I probably can learn to love them. I just need to see them more. Yeah. I don't mind the detached nacelles. I know some people have a problem with that. I'm okay with it. There's crazy explanations that you can give for why that's a good idea, and I'm okay with that. But we really don't see them enough to make a good call one way or the other about it.
I hope we see more of that. I have not. I've been purposely avoiding the teasers and all that. So,
well, you don't. I mean, the teaser for season 5 is quite interesting. They've become masters. Trek has become masters at giving away nothing in their teasers. They've really become good at it.
Yeah. And I tend not to watch the teasers either. I know the Picard trailer came out. I did watch that because, well, I again, there's starships in it. So I really want to watch the starships and start writing these starships. Because every time I see a new starship in a series, any of the new Star Trek series, I'll just write the entry for it that will hopefully someday be published once Modiphius gets the rights for it. But yeah, my computer folder is full of starships that have yet to be published.
How long? This might not be quite a fair question because of the scope of your oeuvre, but how long does it take you to write a starship, as it were, once you're newly acquainted with it?
If it is a brand new starship that we see on screen for 10 minutes, let's say. It's a small part of an episode, like in Strange New Worlds, the single nacelle ship. Let's say I had just seen that. We see the single nacelle ship. It's supposed to be small. It has a crew of 3. It takes me 5-10 minutes to write it up, because I can easily look at that ship and go, okay, it's a single nacelle, so it's a scout. It has a small a small crew, so that means it's going to be scale 3 or 2, most likely 2. It's not going to have a shuttle bay, really. It's going to have transporters, and you just kind of break down and then go, okay, well, what's the rationale for making a ship this small? Why is it being used? Why did Starfleet think it was a good idea, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can just write it out. So maybe 5-10 minutes. And then I might do another pass through it later once I've slept on it, thinking about, okay, how can I rephrase this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Jim will end up going, oh, Aaron, you wrote 3,000 words. Maybe you should cut that down to like 800. Because I know Jim said many times, I'm like the most cut writer, because I just continually give way more than what he wants. But I'm
that's kind of a compliment.
No, I expect things to be cut.
Yeah.
I'm not upset about it. I just want to make sure that he is the line developer, the line manager, I should say, and the editor of me has enough material to go, okay, you know what? I think this is the best piece of story that Aaron wrote that's in this Starship entry. I want to make sure to include this, and this, and then he has to make the tough choice of what to drop.
Okay, we've been promised. So come February, and I'm not in a hurry. Fall is finally looking beautiful. I want it to get cold. Mm-hmm. I want a nice winter, but February will arrive, and with it, among other things, Picard season 3, and we've been promised a lot of the Titan A. So I'm curious. So you've watched it's whatever, March, April now. Mm-hmm. We've seen Picard season 3. You've had a plethora of exposure to a ship like the Titan A. Okay. So there's a lot of catch on. So writing a ship where you have a lot of exposure and some backstory, how much work goes into something like that for you?
A bit more, believe it or not, because I need to make sure that I'm not contradicting anything that's been stated on screen. Mm-hmm. So I will generally rewatch anything that is directly involving that ship.
Yeah.
So maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, and then sleeping on it, making sure that I haven't really forgotten anything, and then maybe another half hour polishing, maybe even less, depending. Because usually I'm pretty good at pulling the information out. Like, that's when I'm watching a show, I'll really remember the stuff on starships. That's just what I really latch onto. So it's fairly easy for me to pull out information when I can out of my head. And then even if there isn't anything there, I can just go form follows function. And it should, especially in Star Trek, and then go, okay, well, this starship has to have this, and this because of the way it looks or what we see on the exterior of the hull, and then go from there.
Interesting. I mean, that's so fast. That's like so intense. I guess I didn't know what to expect, but I mean, you're not spending days writing your way through a ship. You're writing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And usually 15 minutes to a half hour.
Wow.
Do you ever, and again, not
so cool.
No teasers or spoilers. Do you ever, with your online game, do you ever play test any of them? Do any of the new ships?
Not the ships. No.
Okay.
No.
Wow.
No, we don't do that. I will have our game master, Michael Dismuke. He'll often go, Aaron, does this make sense? When it's like a science thing or a technology thing, when he has a question, but usually it's just like, yes. And because it's a story that we're telling, and it doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be completely latched to what I think is right. It's you as the storyteller, as the game master, have a lot to say about that. But he'll go, okay, does this make sense? Am I using polarons correctly or whatever? And I'll be like, well, okay, yeah, I can talk about that, I guess.
Do you ever take like the ships, obviously some of the stuff you've been doing for STA, and now I'm going to ask if you're pirating, so hopefully this doesn't come across wrong. Do you ever like go and actually write them for your game to play them when you pull it out? So
No. I haven't added anything to my game since I started writing STA.
Okay.
And
again, not trying to get you in trouble. I'm just curious.
It's not like I'm publishing my game either.
Right.
Because it's just sitting on my computer for me to play every now and then with my friends. So
neat. Oh man, I think I just had a senior moment.
Well, I'm going to ask, because we usually ask this of our our guests. And Jason and I, at the end of every episode, do what we call the GM's Corner. What's on your desk? What are you reading? What are you working on? If it's a book. Jim was talking about, something completely separate from STA the last time we had him on, which was fascinating because it was unexpected. Outside of work and everything, what's on your desk these days? And STA stuff, anything different or like, hobby oriented or, just regular, maybe fiction or nonfiction you're reading? Or...
I'm always reading books of one sort or another, fiction, nonfiction, history, that kind of thing. Right now I have a Horatio Hornblower novel that I just started. Which one? I can actually reach over and look at it. Lieutenant Hornblower. So it's the second Hornblower novel. And I'd never read the Hornblower books, but somebody had told me, Roddenberry really liked those and kind of based Picard and Kirk off him. And I'm reading it and going, I don't know. Like I see a little bit in Picard, but like not Kirk.
Yeah, no, Roddenberry gave Patrick Stewart, gave him Horatio Hornblower when he was hired for the role and said, read this. Yeah. Right. It inspired the character. Yeah. I've never read it.
And I really don't see it that much, which is weird. And I'm sure that at least with Picard, I can see a little bit of him in Picard. Yeah. A little bit of Hornblower, which is him being separate from the rest of the crew, kind of being a little standoffish and by himself. That there has to be this distance between the captain and the rest of the crew. Yeah. That's the only thing that I really see from Hornblower in Picard. But yeah, anyway, that's what I've been reading. Otherwise, it's usually Star Trek stuff. That I'm reading, like books or finding old technical manual or whatever. It's like the Franz Joseph technical manual is always on my desk, and I'll always just sit there and flip through it, or reading Soviet history from World War II, just to try to like really polish my knowledge of it. So if people try to quiz me on it, I can generally spout off random things fairly well about that. You
ever think about, again, right turn, doing any sort of RPG I know you do the reenactment stuff, but actually doing some RPGs related to World War II or anything like that?
I actually own one RPG that is Soviet World War II, and it's actually called Night Witches, which is based on a real life Soviet unit. It's actually the 588th Night Bomber Regiment. I can talk about them forever, but it's an all-female regiment from the mechanics all the way up to the officers, and they big damn heroes. Let's put it that way. Big damn heroes. Some of them flew up to 800 combat missions during the war, and there's a RPG that's based on it. And since they're all women, there's an aspect of the game that deals with sexism in the Red Army that you need to deal with, this kind of difficulty of operating at night, but yet still having to do things during the day. The stresses of being a woman and a fighter, and how to handle that. And yeah, as a man, I really don't have the perspective that women do in that area, but it's interesting when my wife goes through it and goes, okay, that is interesting, or that's, I'm not really sure I agree with that, when she does that. But yeah, it's an interesting game.
As we head back to Starbase, I've got one. My last question, I think. I always say that it doesn't happen, but we'll see what happens tonight. For a new player or a new GM, or just someone who for the first time is going to meaningfully incorporate a starship into their game, right, as a character, if you will. What would you tell them? What would be your advice of how to make that transition? What change of mindset? What would you tell them?
As making it a part of your game, an important part of your game as a character.
Yeah.
Well, you want your starship to have meaning. And when I say that, there's a name to your starship. Why is it named that? What's its ship motto on its dedication plaque? What missions has it had before you became its crew? What what stories can you come up with just from its name? I always say like Majestic, USS Majestic. It was one of the Miranda classes that's in the Dominion War. Well, why is it called Majestic?
Yeah.
What has the crew done to resemble that name, or what's interesting about what that ship has done throughout its history? It's a Miranda. It's been around for a while, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the examples that I try to give in Utopia Planitia is when you're going through the notable starships. I try to give a story there of why this ship might be named this, or something interesting that it's done, putting real history into it. So a lot of those notable starships, you'll see like references back to real history in it. Tie it in, make that starship feel like it's a part of history. Its name means something. And then make it its own ship. So you make it unique in some way. Why is this ship different than all the other Mirandas or Excelsiors? Does it have a tradition on board? Do its turbo lifts squeak in a certain way that's kind of charming to the crew, that it's weird when they're not on a ship that has that squeak? Oh, I miss my ship. It had that kind of squeak when it goes across decks. You want it to be a person in a way, its own person, unique. And yeah, I'm just babbling. I'm sorry, but
no, keep going. This is great.
This is fascinating.
You have me noodling as you're talking about.
When the game master introduces, when you're starting a game, always refer to the ship as she or he, right? Depending on your language of choice. Mostly it's she. If you're a Russian speaker, Slavic speaker, it's usually he. Usually, not always, but you refer to them as she or he, and describe how they move through space like as though they were a person. So if the ship takes damage, it staggers, or it tumbles through space, wheeling about, or you describe it as though it was a person. And it brings personality to the ship in your description, because as you close your eyes and you hear those words, you can imagine exactly what that ship should be doing, but it evokes those kind of anthropomorphic values.
Yeah.
And it becomes more important to your players in that way.
That is just wonderful. I am so enamored with what you just said. I'll just thank you so much for taking time with us. This is, my God.
That's okay. I'm happy to babble forever,
Oh, this is, man, would you indulge us by coming back in the future to talk more?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, we would be thrilled to have you back. I mean, usually Brad's the one who asks, but I'm beating you to it on this one.
You beat me to it, because I was gonna ask, just because the way you just how that kind of ended. Now I'm being, like, not really the right word, but introspective about Jason and I talking about gaming, and when we decide how we're gonna do it. The idea of that unique ship.
Well, think of Enterprise at the end of Search for Spock. That feeling. Her name was disappearing. She was dying. Her registry was falling in on herself.
Yeah.
And then she tumbled away from her own death, and you hear that kind of squeal of hull rending and the gas escaping. She's dying, and then she tumbles into the atmosphere, and you go to Kirk saying, "My God, what have I done?"
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that, hey, look, I just killed a ship. He just killed his friend.
Yeah.
And in many ways, Enterprise was like his love in the original series, that this was the woman that he would always protect, that he would always be there for her.
Yeah.
And now she's burning up above him.
I mean, it was a very open relationship, but still,
yeah. But it's that personification, that feeling. Her name is dying. Her name is being erased as her hull kind of collapses. It's that kind of symbolism that you want to draw into to give your starship life.
Yeah, and it's funny.
Man.
When the D, was
I
done
almost
in
I almost
generations.
cried on that one.
Yeah, and it was obviously emotional, but Star Trek 3, I was young, and I remember when the hull explodes in both directions, and it blows out, and the noise that it made, that explosion sound. I remember just playing that over and over again, and I still get the goosebumps thinking about it. So yeah, that's. And now with the way you alliterated it, now it's even more so. Now I'm going to have to go back and watch it again.
Yeah, you and I are going to be talking offline, Brad, about what Aaron just said and what that's going to mean for some of our playing.
Well, I think we could probably take what you kind of how you wrap things up, and then what you just talked about now. That could be a whole episode we could talk about.
Remember, this isn't just me saying starships should be like this. This is what people do on ships today, like on Navy ships. Hey, I serve on Indianapolis. And Indianapolis has this, she's this kind of ship. Or, when there was another Enterprise in service, I serve on the Big E. Big E's my girl, and it's same with aircraft. You name aircraft that are important. They have their personalities, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Especially in World War II, you see those pieces of nose art, those guys that are in the U.S. Army Air Corps, they're painting nose art on their ships because their airplanes, because they're allowed to, sure. But these are the girls that are keeping them alive.
Right.
That these are these young guys that maybe have never even lived life. And this is the one thing that's the most important thing in their life, to make sure that she comes home, because just she comes home, we come home. And it's that sort of importance that at least I try to impart in some of my descriptions. I only hope I can, but just by talking here, I can say, hey, look, this is important. Try to keep these things in mind. And you might have a more evocative game, let's say.
Or even just thinking about that when you read the book, even if you haven't played yet.
Read Utopia, Planitia.
Read those notable starships. Read that.
I know you're going to read those and go, oh, here's a Soviet World War II reference. Aaron obviously wrote that, but I wrote all those notable starships. They're there for stories. I'm trying to write little stories to trigger things in your mind, to let you have ideas for new stories of your own.
Well, when those hard copies land in our hands, I mean, I know that's a ways off, but when those land in our hands, because that, for me, that's a whole other way of interacting with it, right? Where I can sit down with it and just page through it. Just for me, that works. You will be hearing from us for a follow-up.
You'll hear from us beforehand.
Probably. But you are so going to hear from us when we get those physically in our hands and can actually sit down. Really, really appreciate you taking the time and talking about your science and your Star Trek and the intersection and the starships. And and this has just been really, really lovely and so very interesting and so very motivating to play, which is something I think we all need these days.
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have talked. It's Star Trek is all about positivity and hope, and it's one of those things that I'll never get tired of talking about. No, because I want that hope in my life.
Yeah, here,
and we all need it.
Yeah, Aaron, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, after Jason and I talked with Aaron, it really, really changed my perception of how we would game and how we would perceive starships. Now, I posted a couple things out on Twitter. I grew up watching the original series, not a ton, but enough that I had a real affinity for the characters. And, we talked about this. You heard about this during our interview. When the Enterprise, when they destroyed the Enterprise and when it self-destructed and burned up in the Genesis planet's atmosphere, that was one of those things that I played over and over again, just because I couldn't believe that the Enterprise was gone. So, talking about it tonight, it reminded me of how I felt. Now, I was a kid when it came out, but I was pretty engrossed with Star Trek at the time. And I was telling Jason that even with the Enterprise D destroyed during Star Trek Generations, it didn't have the same effect on me. And maybe because I was an adult, but it didn't have the same effect on me that the original Enterprise did when it was destroyed in Star Trek 3. So just listening to that tonight reminded me of how I felt about that ship, the same way how I felt about the characters. And while I loved Star Trek 4, loved the movie, it was weird to have a movie without an Enterprise. And I was glad to see it at the end, but just for the bulk of the movie, it was just really odd for me not to see it. So we really hope you enjoyed the interview. As we go over, it's a one-man GM corner. I'm sitting here and looking at the One Ring. I've talked about this multiple times, but I actually printed out what's called the One Ring Strider mode. It is solo role playing with the One Ring. And I was talking to Jason that I'm really kind of trying to narrow my focus so I don't get scatterbrained about it. But I've really kind of focused on D&D, obviously Star Trek. I mean, I couldn't not, especially after talking with Jim a couple episodes and then talking with Aaron, but also the One Ring, just because I have an ability now to play solo or try it solo. And I actually thought the Strider mode was cool enough that I actually had it printed and wire bound at FedEx. So it's X and with a vinyl cover and everything like that. So I actually can treat it as a book. I'm just a little bit of a dork that way. So I thought tonight, I didn't talk about this before, but I really thought there was an interesting article. I haven't heard the interview, but apparently Joe Rogan, I'm not a fan, did an interview with an AI version of Steve Jobs. Have no idea what it sounded like, but I also thought about having an AI version of Jason, but then I figured I don't want the personality of that AI to outshine him. So I decided against it. I figured I'd just go solo this time. And I can take my pot shots at him since he's not here to respond. But in all seriousness, again, he's on the road for some research. I wish him well. We didn't get a chance to record this before he had a chance to leave, but I am glad I had the opportunity as much as I'm able to have a conversation alone. It is a little bit odd for me to not be able to pass this jokes aside, to be able to pass back and forth and kind of feed off each other intellectually and in our thoughts related to gaming. But I hope you enjoyed the interview. I'm going to try to, I think I've tried this once before, but the outro is always Jason. So it's a little weird for me to do this. Be well, stay well, and we will hear from you and you will hear from us really soon. Take care.